Which policy did your teacher violate? I was in music class when I noticed that familiar tingling in my fingers. Can you imagine looking your teacher in the eye, telling them you're moments away from a life-threatening seizure, and they just laugh? That's what happened to me. And because of her disbelief, her cruelty, someone I cared about died. I'd been seizure-free for 3 blissful months. But that morning, I felt it, that familiar, terrifying electricity building in my brain. It was like a static shock was spreading, tingling up my arm. "Miss Blackwood," I croaked, my voice shaking. "I need to get to the nurse. I'm about to have a seizure." She looked at me, a substitute teacher I'd never seen before, and her eyes, they just rolled. "Oh, please," she scoffed, a sneer twisting her lips. "Every kid suddenly has epilepsy now. It's trendy." Trendy? My blood ran cold. "No, you don't understand," I pleaded, my voice rising in panic. I had maybe 2 minutes, tops, before I'd lose consciousness. I told her about my seizure action plan, the one in my file, the one designed for this very moment. "Sit down," she ordered, standing up. But instead of helping, she leaned over my desk, her face inches from mine. "You know what my sister did when her daughter claimed to have seizures? She ignored them completely, miraculously cured in a week." Emily, my best friend, was already up, running towards the emergency button by the door. "She's not faking," she screamed. "I've seen her seizures before." Miss Blackwood blocked her path. The only thing seizing is her need for attention. Then she did something I'll never, ever forget. She walked to the classroom door, turned the deadbolt with a chilling click, and dropped the key into her pocket. Nobody leaves until she admits she's faking. This victim complex is destroying your generation. Panic erupted. "Call 911, someone yelled, reaching for their phone. "Phone's in the box? Now," she snapped, grabbing the collection box. "Or you're all suspended." My vision was blurring at the edges. 2 minutes. That's all I had before my brain would just misfire. It was a number my neurologist had made me memorize. And then, my cousin Walsh, the one I hated more than anything, opened his mouth. "She used to fake seizures ever since she was little," he chimed in. Miss Blackwood's face lit up. "See? Even her boyfriend knows she's performing." She mistook Walsh for Darren, my actual boyfriend. She walked back to the smart board, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You know what really helps with fake seizures," she said, pulling up YouTube. She typed in flashing strobe light 10 hours and hit play. "Exposure therapy. If you were really epileptic, I wouldn't do this. But since you're faking..." The screen exploded. Rapid-fire flashes of white, then black, then white again. My brain felt like it was being electrocuted. "Turn it off," Emily shrieked. "Photosensitive epilepsy is real." Miss Blackwood just cranked the brightness to maximum. Psychosomatic reaction. She believes she's seizing, so her body mimics it. That's when David, a quiet kid who sat near me, grabbed his head. His whole body went rigid. "I can't. The lights." Everyone lost it. Kids were diving under desks, throwing jackets over their heads, screaming, "Turn it off." Malik was desperately trying to cover my eyes with his hands, whispering, "Please don't seize. Please don't seize." Ryan was slamming his shoulder into the locked door. "Help! Somebody help!" Miss Blackwood just laughed. "Sit down or you're expelled." 3 other kids were on the floor now. The strobing was triggering something in everyone. Migraines, nausea, pure, raw panic. "Make it stop!" Jenna cried, pressing her hands to her temples. Through the door window, Mr. Peter from next door peered in. Miss Blackwood stepped in front of the window, blocking his view of the chaos, gave him a chipper thumbs up, and then pulled down the shade. He just walked away. "This is torture!" Emily screamed. 1 minute left. My consciousness was slipping. My muscles had started to twitch. And Miss Blackwood, that monster, She actually turned up the speed on the strobe. When I was in school, nobody had seizures. Now, suddenly, everyone's neurodivergent. Thanks, social media. My body wasn't mine anymore. The seizure hit like a lightning bolt. Sarah told me later that's when things got really bad. My seizure was violent, thrashing, foaming, turning blue. She tried to turn me on my side, but I was convulsing too hard. She's dying. Sarah screamed, my blood on her hands from where I'd bitten my tongue. Miss Blackwood stood there, eating an apple. Oscar-worthy performance, she drawled, though the fake blood is a bit much. That's when Billy, the sweet, quiet kid who never caused trouble, just lost it. He grabbed a music stand like a battering ram. Violence. Really? Miss Blackwood pulled out her phone, recording. This is going straight to the principal. Billy swung. Crack! The smartboard went black. Destruction of property, she shrieked. That's a felony. But Billy didn't stop. He turned and smashed the door window. Glass everywhere. David was seizing just 3 feet away. Jenna was vomiting from the strobe exposure. It was complete. Utter chaos. Assault. You're all going to jail. Blackwood screamed. That's when my boyfriend, Darren, saw me through the broken window. He completely lost it. He reached through, slicing his hand on the glass, fumbling for the lock. Don't you dare, the sub shrieked, but Emily and Billy held her back. The door flew open. Teachers came flooding in. Call 911, someone screamed. Multiple students seizing. They were restraining Miss Blackwood, and she was still yelling, still screaming. They are all faking. This is mass hysteria. The paramedics told me later I was clinically dead for 90 seconds. 90 seconds of nothingness. They had to intubate me right there in the hallway while they worked on David just 10 feet away. Turns out, he had undiagnosed epilepsy. Miss Blackwood was given paid time off while her performance was under review. A few parents set up a GoFundMe for David's treatment. 2 weeks later, we were in science class when they broke the news. David's parents had only raised $30,000 of the $130,000 he needed. He didn't make it. That's when I knew. We had to take matters into our own hands. We had to destroy Miss Blackwood. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold my pencil. Our teacher droned on about cell division, but all I could think about was David. His cells stopped dividing because his parents couldn't afford to keep them going. I sat there, frozen, while everyone else took notes like nothing had happened. Like David wasn't dead. Like Miss Blackwood wasn't sitting at home, getting paid, while he was in the ground. The rage was a hot, burning fire in my chest. I thought I might throw up right there at my desk. When the bell rang, I ran. Barely made it to the bathroom before everything came up. Emily followed me in, held my hair back, whispering that we couldn't let Miss Blackwood get away with this. She was right, but I could barely stand. My legs shook, my head pounded. That night, sleep was impossible. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying those 90 seconds when I was dead. The darkness, the nothing. Did David feel that? Was it different for him? My parents kept checking on me, every hour, terrified the stress would trigger another seizure. Mom would peek in. Dad would just stand in the doorway, watching me breathe. The next morning, David's locker was piled high with flowers and cards. Someone had taped his school picture to the door. A freshman girl walked by and asked what happened. When someone told her about the seizure, she actually said it sounded made up. I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, numb, staring at the flowers. At lunch, I found Billy sitting alone. His knuckles were still wrapped in bandages from smashing the smartboard. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't been sleeping either. He couldn't stop seeing David on the floor. We just sat in silence. Nothing we said would help. Nothing would bring David back. After school, Darren was waiting by my locker, a stack of printed papers in his hand. He'd found Miss Blackwood's social media accounts before she privatized them. Post after post, going back years, mocking kids with disabilities, calling them trendy. praising her sister's tough love for her daughter's fake seizures. Pictures of her at conferences about combating victim mentality in schools. Every post made me want to throw up again. David's funeral was 3 days later. The church was packed. His mom, Nev, sat in the front row, looking like she hadn't eaten or slept. When I went to pay my respects, she grabbed my hand, so tight it hurt. She kept whispering about the GoFundMe messages, how people kept saying they were sorry, but $30,000 wasn't enough. Her grip was crushing my fingers, but I didn't pull away. She needed someone to hold on to. After the service, I saw Walsh. I couldn't help myself. I walked right up to him. "How could you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How could you tell her I was faking when you knew about my epilepsy?" He started crying, right there by his car. He said our grandmother always told him I was faking for attention. He believed her because it was easier than accepting I was really sick. He said he was sorry, but sorry didn't bring David back. Monday morning, Principal Penn called me and my parents to her office. She sat behind her big desk, offering careful condolences, talking about proper procedures. She kept emphasizing how the school followed protocol and how substitute teachers go through training. She never once admitted those procedures failed David. She never even said his name without glancing at her lawyer on the phone. My dad's jaw clenched with every mention of procedures. After that meeting, they sent me to the district's 504 coordinator. They reviewed my accommodation plan with fake sympathy, asking if they could have done anything differently, like David wasn't literally dead because of what they did. They wanted me to say it was okay, that the system worked. But the system killed David. They wanted me to pretend it didn't. I sat there, listening to them talk about updated training and new protocols, while all I could think about was David seizing on that floor. It all felt so twisted. Miss Blackwood knew exactly which buttons to push. The strobe lights, the locked door, calling epilepsy trendy. It was like she had a whole plan, ready to go. The way David's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back, and that substitute eating her apple while he was dying. They kept talking about moving forward, learning from this tragedy. But they never said what they learned. They never said they were wrong. They never said David should still be alive. When I left that office, I knew nothing would change unless we made it change. Miss Blackwood would come back from paid leave, and some other kid would die. The school would have more meetings, more protocols, but nothing would actually get better. That's when Emily, Billy, Darren, and I started planning. We weren't going to let them sweep this under the rug like David never existed. The first thing we did was go to the police station. My mom drove us there. The building smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. We sat in those hard plastic chairs for 2 hours before the detective finally called us in. He had this thick folder on his desk with David's name on it. I could see the corner of his death certificate sticking out. The detective kept saying things like alleged incident and under investigation. He told us these cases take time, there's a process. My mom asked when we'd hear something definite. He just shrugged. Weeks? Maybe months. Emily's mom started crying. He handed her a tissue box, said he understood our frustration, but they had to be thorough. Alleged, he kept saying, even though David was dead, even though we all saw what happened, even though the paramedics had reports. Everything's under review. That's all he would say. Under review. 3 days later, my mom took me to the mall for new shoes. The food court lights, those old fluorescent ones, buzzed and flickered. I didn't think about it until we walked past Orange Julius. Then the lights started that pulsing thing. My chest got tight. My hands started shaking. The lights kept flickering, and suddenly, I was back in that classroom. I dropped to the floor right there by the pretzel stand. People stared. Some kid was recording on his phone. Security came running, thinking I was on drugs. My mom tried to explain, but I couldn't breathe. The lights kept flickering. They had to help me out through the employee exit. Everyone watched, whispering. I felt so weak, so broken. The next Monday at school, a gal from the newspaper came up to me, recorder in hand. She wanted to do a story. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, every single detail about Miss Blackwood. But I also knew how these things go. One wrong word, and suddenly the story becomes about something else. Or the school makes me look like I'm making it up, or they twist it around. I told her I couldn't talk about it yet. She kept pushing, saying people deserve to know the truth. Maybe she was right, but I wasn't ready. That weekend, I stayed in my room, organizing. I pulled out my seizure action plan, the one the school was supposed to follow. All my hospital records from the past 3 years. The emails my parents sent at the beginning of the year explaining my condition. The letter from my neurologist. Each piece of paper felt like crucial evidence. Proof that this shouldn't have happened. I made copies of everything, put them in a binder with tabs. My mom helped me scan them. 3 flash drives, just in case. While I was organizing, I kept checking David's GoFundMe. Still stuck at $30,000. His parents needed $130,000 for medical bills before he died. The comments had stopped. People had moved on. That's how it works, right? Something terrible happens. Everyone cares for a week. Then they forget. Kids die because their families can't afford treatment. That's just how things are. The anger was eating me up, making me sick all the time. On Sunday, Emily and Billy came over with Malik. We sat in my basement, trying to figure out what to do. Darren showed up late, sat on the stairs instead of with us, checking his phone. Finally, Emily asked him what his problem was. He said his coach told him not to get involved. Said it could mess up his scholarship chances. That hurt more than I expected. He was supposed to be on our side. He was supposed to care about David, about me. But his stupid football scholarship was more important. Emily suggested public records requests. Her older sister did it once for a school project. We spent hours writing them. For the 911 call recordings, security camera footage from the hallway, incident reports. We sent them to the district office that week. They wrote back, saying everything was part of an ongoing investigation. Couldn't release anything due to student privacy laws. It felt like a cover-up, like they were hiding something. That's when Emily's mom mentioned she knew a lawyer, a woman named Ola Purcell, who did civil rights cases. She agreed to meet with us, pro bono, if we could get organized. Her office was downtown, covered in awards, pictures with important people. She listened to our entire story without interrupting once. Then she laid it out. She needed evidence, witness statements, documentation, everything preserved properly. She gave us specific instructions. Screenshot any social media posts about the incident before they were deleted. Write down everything we remembered while it was fresh. Get contact info for every witness, but absolutely no contact with Miss Blackwood. No messages, no confrontations, nothing that could be seen as harassment. The rules felt limiting, but having a plan, it helped. It made me feel less helpless, less like I was drowning. We made a group chat that night to coordinate. Emily would collect witness statements. Billy would organize documents. Malik would create a timeline. Everyone had a job. Something to focus on besides just being angry. It felt like we were actually doing something. Not just going to let them sweep this away. The next morning, Principal Penn's voice crackled over the PA system during homeroom. Everyone stopped writing, listening. She cleared her throat twice. Then I heard it in her tone. She was reading from something prepared. Any student participating in walkouts or protests during school hours will face automatic suspension and removal from all extracurricular activities, effective immediately. The room went silent. Kids exchanged looks. My hands started shaking. I knew what this meant for our plans. We'd been talking about something bigger than just collecting evidence. Now they were trying to scare us into silence. The announcement went on about maintaining order, respecting the learning environment. But I stopped listening. I started texting under my desk. Within 5 minutes, our group chat had 40 messages, all saying the same thing. We were doing it anyway. Third period was when we planned it. Nothing was going to stop us now. Not after what happened to David. The bell rang. I grabbed my stuff, trying to look normal, but my heart was pounding. In the hallway, I passed 3 security guards I'd never seen before, standing by the main entrance, watching everyone, writing on clipboards. 2 more by the side exits. The message was clear. It just made me angrier. Second period dragged on forever. I kept checking the clock every 2 minutes. The teacher talked about symbolism in some book, but I couldn't focus. Finally, the bell rang for third period. I stood up with everyone else, but instead of going to class, I turned toward the main entrance. Emily was already there with Billy, Malik, and about 10 other kids. More were coming from different directions. A security guard stepped forward, blocking the doors, but we kept walking. One started saying something about consequences, but 40 kids pushing forward was more than 3 guards could handle. We pushed through the doors and out into the parking lot, where more students were already gathering. Some teachers stood in their doorways, watching. Nobody tried to stop us. A few even nodded, subtly. We walked to the front lawn and stood there, in a group. Not chanting, not holding signs, just standing. Together, in silence. For David. Cars driving by started honking. People took pictures with their phones. After 20 minutes, we walked back inside and went to our classes like nothing happened. By the end of the day, yellow detention slips were stuffed in all our lockers, dates and times in red pen. Mine was for every day after school for 2 weeks. That night, Walsh decided to make everything worse. He posted an old video on social media from a family barbecue 3 years ago. I was laughing, playing cornhole, looking completely normal. He captioned it, saying this proved I'd always been fine and just played up my condition for attention when it was convenient. The betrayal hit harder than anything. He was using our shared memories as weapons. He knew that video was from a good day, between seizures, but he twisted it, made it look like evidence I was faking. Within an hour, it had 200 shares. The comments were brutal. Liar. Drama queen. David's death is her fault for creating drama. I threw my phone across the room, heard the screen crack against the wall. The next morning, Darren found Walsh by his locker before first period. I heard about it from 3 different people before I even got to school. Darren grabbed Walsh's shirt, slammed him back into the metal lockers hard enough that everyone in the hallway heard it. Walsh tried to say something, but Darren shoved him again, his head hitting the combination lock. 2 teachers came running, pulled them apart, but not before Darren got one more push in, sending Walsh's books flying. They both got marched to the office. By lunch, both had 3-day suspensions. Darren's mom had to leave work to pick him up. I felt sick knowing his protective instinct was costing him his education. He texted me that night, worth it. But I knew his parents were furious. 3 days later, I finally agreed to do the interview with the student journalist. After saying no 5 times, we met in an empty classroom after school. I set clear boundaries. No questions about my family or medical history before the incident. No speculation about blame. Just facts. My voice shook the entire time. I had to stop twice to drink water. My mouth was so dry. She asked about the strobe lights. I described the feeling of my brain misfiring. She asked about the locked door. I explained how trapped we felt. She asked about David. I couldn't speak for almost a minute. When it was over, I felt empty, exhausted, but at least I'd said it out loud to someone who would write it down. The article went online that night. Within 2 hours, the comment section exploded. Half the people supported us, sharing their own stories about teachers ignoring medical conditions. The other half called us hysterical attention seekers, looking to blame someone for a tragedy. One comment said David's death was just unfortunate timing, and we were using it to attack a good teacher. Another said we were drama queens making everything about ourselves. Reading strangers debate whether David's death was preventable made me run to the bathroom and throw up. My mom found me on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later, sobbing. The next day, Ola called my mom with unexpected news. One of the paramedics who worked on me that day had reached out through her law office. He couldn't speak publicly, strict employer policies, but he said if formally subpoenaed, he would provide a statement about what he saw. He remembered everything, including how long it took to revive me and the state of the classroom when they arrived. His testimony could prove how serious it really was. 2 days later, we got the transcript from Mr. Peters' deposition. It made everything worse. He claimed he saw nothing concerning when he looked through the door window, just Miss Blackwood giving him a thumbs up. So he assumed everything was fine and kept walking. He said the shade was already down when he looked, and he had no reason to think students were in distress. Reading that he could have saved us, but didn't even notice. I lost faith in every adult who was supposed to protect us. He was 20 feet away while we were dying, and he just walked past. That same afternoon, Malik found something incredible online. Miss Blackwood had an old blog from 5 years ago. She'd forgotten to delete it. He'd been searching for hours, post after post, ranting about neurodivergent kids being coddled and creating victim culture in schools. One entry said seizure disorders were overdiagnosed, and most kids just wanted attention and special treatment. Another said parents enabled fake medical conditions to excuse poor behavior. We screenshotted everything before she could delete it and added it to our evidence folder, which was getting thicker every day. Alla sent formal preservation letters to the district and the smart board manufacturer the next morning, demanding they maintain all electronic logs from that classroom. The legal language made everything feel more real, more serious, than our group chat planning ever did. The next morning, a letter appeared in every student mailbox. Teachers' Union logo at the top. 3 pages of legal threats about what would happen if any student posted Miss Blackwood's name online. Defamation, libel, civil lawsuit. They jumped out at me as I read it in the hallway. Kids were passing copies around. Some were already deleting their social media posts from the night before. I watched 2 freshmen actually crying as they read about personal liability and permanent records. Emily grabbed my copy and ripped it in half, right there in front of everyone. The anger spread through the hallway like wildfire as more kids realized we were being threatened for telling the truth. My mom had to pick me up early that day for a grocery run. I thought I'd be fine. But at the self-checkout, the machine started flashing red when the barcode wouldn't scan. My whole body went rigid. The stroke pattern hit my brain like a hammer. Suddenly, I couldn't remember where I was. My legs turned to jelly. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling. Mom dropped everything, wrapped her arms around me, and guided me toward the exit. People stayed as she practically carried me through the parking lot while I tried to remember how to walk. My hands were still shaking when we got to the car. I realized the triggers were getting worse, not better. Every flashing light felt like a threat now. I couldn't make my brain understand the difference between danger and normal life. Darren started showing up at my locker between every single class the next day. He'd walk me to each room, his hand on my back, like I might collapse any second. At lunch, he checked on me 3 times. After school, he followed me to my car, even though his was on the other side of the lot. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him I needed space to breathe. He looked at me like I'd slapped him, said he was just trying to protect me. We stood there in the parking lot, yelling at each other for the first time since we'd started dating. He kept saying he couldn't lose me, too. I kept saying I wasn't made of glass. Neither of us won that fight. We didn't talk for 2 days. Someone leaked an email chain from the administration that Thursday. It spread through the school like poison. Subject line: managing the paid leave situation. Every message talked about optics, liability, media response. Not one single email mentioned David's name or asked how the rest of us were doing. They called it an incident, discussed damage control, like we were a PR problem to solve. The corporate language about a dead kid made me run to the bathroom and throw up. My hands shook as I forwarded it to Alla. She said it was exactly what we needed for the case. The school board meeting that night was packed with parents and reporters. We each got 2 minutes to speak. I was third, after Emily and Billy. My voice cracked when I said David's name, but I kept reading from my notes about what really happened. Behind me, I could hear parents whispering about mass hysteria and attention-seeking teenagers. One dad actually laughed when I described my seizure. I wanted to turn around and scream at them, but I kept going until my time ran out. The district's 504 coordinator, Ren, stood up during the public comment period with a thick folder. He proposed mandatory training for all substitute teachers about medical conditions and emergency protocols. The board members nodded, took notes, said they'd implement it within the next academic year. I wanted to scream that David needed help 6 weeks ago, not next September. The timeline felt like another slap in the face. Ola helped us file a federal complaint with the Office for Civil Rights the following week. The woman on the phone was nice, but she explained the investigation could take 18 months. She used words like thorough and comprehensive while I stared at the calendar, thinking about David, already in the ground. Justice delayed felt exactly like justice denied when the person who needed it most was gone. Every form we filled out felt pointless, but Ola said we needed the paper trail. At school, kids started crossing the hallway when they saw me coming. Rumors spread that I wanted tension and got what I wanted, even though David paid the price. Someone wrote "Drama Queen" on my locker in permanent marker. Whispers followed me everywhere about how I destroyed Miss Blackwood's career for nothing. The physical symptoms hurt, but the social isolation hurt worse. Emily showed up at my house Sunday night, red-eyed, snot running down her face. Her parents had given her an ultimatum: choose her future over my vendetta. They said she was ruining her college prospects by associating with me. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. She promised she wasn't abandoning me, no matter what they threatened. We sat on my bed, crying together until she had to go home. Mr. Peter pulled me aside after school on Monday, asked if we could talk privately. His hands were shaking as he admitted he should have looked closer through that window. He said he was haunted by what he didn't do, couldn't sleep anymore. The guilt in his eyes seemed real, but his remorse didn't bring David back. He asked what he could do to help. I told him to testify at the hearing, if we ever got one. 3 days later, the mail carrier handed me a thick envelope from the Office for Civil Rights. My hands shook as I tore it open in the kitchen. An official government seal at the top. "Your complainant," it began, followed by our case number, 2024 to 1847, in bold. Mom read it over my shoulder. It was just paperwork, formal language about them receiving our complaint and starting an investigation. But seeing that case number, it made everything feel more real, more official. The next morning, I was spinning my locker combination when something fell out and hit my shoe. A small, black USB drive, no label. I picked it up, wondering if someone dropped it. During lunch, I plugged it into my laptop in the library. A single video file appeared. The timestamp showed it was from that day in music class. My stomach dropped as I clicked play. The footage was grainy, hallway security camera video, but you could see straight through our classroom door window for about 30 seconds. Kids diving under desks. Someone clearly seizing on the floor. Miss Blackwood standing there, doing nothing. The angle wasn't perfect, but you could make out the chaos, and her complete, chilling lack of response to the medical emergency. I immediately texted Emily, who ran over from the cafeteria. We watched it 3 times before calling Ola. She answered on the second ring. "Don't share it with anyone," she said, "or even make copies, until I can verify where it came from." The chain of custody was critical, she explained. We couldn't risk it being thrown out of court on a technicality. Someone inside the school was trying to help us, but we had no idea who had access to that footage, or why they'd chosen to give it to me anonymously. That afternoon, Mom drove me to the Pritchard house. David's mother was waiting in the living room, boxes of tissues and photo albums spread across the coffee table. She led me upstairs to David's room. It looked exactly like he'd left it that morning before school. Bed half made, chemistry textbook open on his desk. His college applications were stacked next to his computer. Northwestern on top, essay section completed, but never submitted. We sat on his bed. She held my hand, explaining she'd hired her own lawyer to pursue a civil suit against the district and Miss Blackwood personally. She asked if I'd testify. I nodded immediately. David deserved justice, even if he wasn't here to see it. She showed me his journal, where he'd written about wanting to be a doctor to help kids with neurological conditions like his own epilepsy, the one nobody knew about. The next day, Darren asked to talk privately after school. We sat in his car, in the parking lot, him staring at the steering wheel. He explained his basketball scholarship to state was threatened because of his involvement. His coach had warned him to stay quiet. His hands gripped the wheel as he promised he still loved me, but he couldn't risk his entire future by being publicly involved in the fight against Miss Blackwood. Intellectually, I understood. College was his only way out of our town. But it still felt like he was choosing his future over doing what was right. He dropped me off at home, and I watched his car disappear, knowing our relationship would never be the same. 2 days later, Mom drove me to my first therapy appointment, small office building downtown. The therapist had me fill out forms about my seizure triggers. She explained we'd work on practical coping strategies for managing light sensitivity and stress. For homework, a worksheet to track my triggers. It meant accepting this was my new normal. She taught me breathing exercises, showed me special glasses that could filter out sight and light frequencies. That weekend, I was checking social media when Emily called, screaming. Someone had created a fake account using my name and profile picture. It had posted screenshots of my medical records, my epilepsy diagnosis, medication list, with nasty comments about attention-seeking. By the time we reported it and got it taken down, the screenshots were already circulating through group chats, reposted by anonymous accounts. Someone had violated HIPAA laws to get those records. They were trying to humiliate me online. We couldn't trace who was behind it. Ola suggested I take control of my own narrative, record a video statement. I set up my phone in my bedroom, spent 3 hours getting through the facts without crying or showing emotion. The final version was 8 minutes of me calmly explaining the timeline, Miss Blackwood's specific actions. Posting it felt scary, but it gave me some control over my story, instead of letting others twist it. Within 2 days, local news reporter Seamus Rader contacted Ola, asking for an interview. He ran a segment on the evening news, showing my video statement, interviewing other parents whose kids were in the room. Tips started flooding into the news station about Miss Blackwood's behavior at her previous 2 schools, including an incident where she'd locked a diabetic student in a closet during a blood sugar crisis. The police finally scheduled formal interviews with all 23 students from the classroom. Ola sat next to me as my attorney while I gave my statement. They asked detailed questions about every minute of that day. A stenographer typed everything I said. 2 detectives took notes. Miss Blackwood's lawyer had apparently advised her not to speak to investigators. Ola said that was basically an admission that she knew she'd done something wrong. 2 days later, the IT guy from the district called Ola's office. I was there, going over paperwork. She put him on speaker. We both heard it. He'd pulled up the smartboard logs from that exact classroom, on that exact day. There it was. A YouTube video, Extreme Strobe Light Challenge 10 hours, played from 11:42 a.m. to 11:54 a.m., exactly when everything happened. The log showed Miss Blackwood's login credentials. Starting the video, setting it to full screen, maximum brightness. Seeing that digital proof, it made my chest feel tight. Even though it didn't bring David back. Or fix what happened to any of us. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at my house from the school district's lawyers. An offer, $50,000 if I signed their settlement agreement. It included a non-disclosure agreement. It would stop me from ever talking about what happened publicly again. My mom read through the 20-page document at the kitchen table while I ate cereal. She kept shaking her head, especially at the section that said I couldn't post on social media, give interviews, or participate in any legal action against the district or Miss Blackwood personally. The money would cover most of my medical bills from the ambulance ride and emergency room, plus the new medication I had to take because my seizures got worse. But signing meant staying quiet about David dying, about Miss Blackwood still being on paid leave like nothing happened. 3 days later, Malik texted everyone, meet at his garage after school, to talk about the settlements. Apparently, we all got the same offer. When I showed up, 12 kids were already there, the letters spread out on his dad's workbench. Billy paced, saying we should all refuse. Taking the money meant they won. Sarah kept saying her family needed the money for therapy bills. She couldn't sleep without seeing David's face turning blue. The arguments got louder when someone's older brother, a law student, showed up. He explained that if we took the settlements, we couldn't be witnesses in each other's cases or help David's parents with their wrongful death lawsuit. Everyone started yelling about whether we owed it to David to refuse the money. Emily grabbed my arm, pulled me outside where it was quieter. She said anyone who took the money was basically saying David's life was worth $50,000. Then Walsh showed up, arguing we'd be stupid not to take guaranteed money when a trial could take years, and we might lose anyway. My phone buzzed. A text from Darren. Just take the money. Use it to move to a different school district. Start fresh, without everyone knowing you as the seizure girl. I showed it to Emily. She got mad. That's exactly what the district wants, she said. For us to disappear, let them sweep everything under the rug. The stress of being pulled between them, my hand shook. I had to sit down on the curb. I felt another seizure coming on. It scared everyone enough that the arguing stopped for a few minutes while Malik got me water, made sure I was okay. The next day, Principal Penn pulled me out of English class, brought me to her office. She had this whole presentation set up, a restorative justice healing circle. Miss Blackwood would apologize, we would share our feelings, and move forward together as a community. She showed me a PowerPoint with stock photos of people hugging and holding hands in circles. She explained how this would help everyone heal. Wouldn't that be better than all this legal fighting that's tearing the school apart? She said. I told her I didn't want to sit in a circle and pretend to forgive someone who killed my classmate. She gave me this tight smile. That's a very strong word to use, she said. Maybe you should consider how your inflammatory language is affecting other students' ability to process their trauma. She kept pushing, saying Miss Blackwood was suffering, too, and deserved a chance to make amends. That's when I stood up and walked out. Didn't say another word. I knew if I stayed, I'd say something that would get me suspended. That afternoon, Ola called. David's mom's lawyer had reached out. They wanted to coordinate our cases. The district was trying to play us against each other, offering different settlement amounts to different families based on how much they thought we'd fight. David's mom, Nev, wanted all the families to work together so the district couldn't pick us off one by one. Hearing that David's mom was fighting, too, it made me feel less alone in refusing to just take the money and shut up. Over the next 2 weeks, Ola had me come to her office every day after school, to practice for my deposition, making me tell the story over and over. She played the role of Miss Blackwood's lawyer, asking hostile questions designed to make me look like a liar, an attention seeker. She taught me to pause before answering, to only answer exactly what was asked, to stay calm, even when the questions made me angry, which was hard when she asked things like whether I'd ever exaggerated my symptoms before, or if I enjoyed the attention I got from having seizures. We even planned what to do if I had a seizure during the deposition. Ola made sure the court reporter knew to note everything that happened, and had my medical alert info ready, just in case opposing counsel tried to claim I was faking. The morning of Miss Blackwood's deposition, I wasn't allowed in the room. But Ola told me about it afterward. How Miss Blackwood sat there in a navy suit, insisting we were all performing, that teenage girls especially were prone to mass hysteria and attention-seeking behavior. She actually brought up her sister's daughter, who supposedly faked seizures for 2 years before her parents stopped enabling her, and miraculously, she was cured. She used this as proof that she knew we were all faking. That's why she felt confident using the strobe light as exposure therapy. When they asked her about David, she said he was probably just caught up in the group hysteria and that his death was an unfortunate coincidence, but not related to her actions. It made me so angry my hands shook. I had to leave Ola's office, walk around the block 3 times before I could calm down. The next week was Mr. Peter's deposition. This time, Ola let me watch through the glass door. I saw him break down crying when they asked him about looking through our classroom window that day. He admitted he saw Miss Blackwood give him a thumbs up. He assumed everything was fine because she seemed calm. But he didn't really look at us students. Didn't notice the chaos happening behind her. Now, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how he could have stopped everything if he'd just opened the door. His tears seemed real. He kept saying he was sorry. But sorry didn't bring David back. And sorry didn't fix my brain, which now had seizures twice as often. I noticed Miss Blackwood never said sorry. Not even once. The last deposition that week was Superintendent Paxton. He spent 3 hours explaining how the district's substitute teacher training was comprehensive, but that Miss Blackwood was an aberration who acted outside the scope of her training. Basically, trying to throw her under the bus while protecting the district from liability. He kept using phrases like isolated incident and couldn't have been prevented, while his lawyer nodded along. When they asked him about David, he called it a tragic outcome, but insisted the district followed all protocols in their response. Even though it took the ambulance 15 minutes to arrive because no one called 911 immediately, since Miss Blackwood had locked the door and taken our phones. 3 weeks later, Walsh sat in the lawyer's office for his deposition. I watched through the glass door as he kept looking down at his hands. The lawyer asked him about that day in music class, and he started talking about our grandmother. How she'd been telling him since we were kids that I was faking everything for attention. He said she'd call him every week to warn him about my manipulation tactics, how I'd fooled all the doctors. She'd send him articles about Munchausen syndrome, tell him stories about times I'd supposedly pretended to be sick to get out of family events. The lawyer wrote everything down while Walsh explained how grandmother had convinced him that helping me would just enable my behavior. He admitted she'd been poisoning his mind against me for years, but he said it didn't excuse what he did. Back at school the next morning, everything felt different. Some kids came up to me in the hallway, saying they were sorry for not doing more that day. Malik brought me a card signed by half the basketball team, but other kids rolled their eyes when they saw me coming. I heard whispers about how we were being dramatic, how David would have died anyway because of his condition. One girl said we were just trying to get money from the lawsuit. The cafeteria split into 2 groups, those wearing purple ribbons for David, and those who thought we were overreacting. Fights broke out in the parking lot between kids arguing about whether Miss Blackwood deserved what was happening to her. 2 months passed before we got the court date. The judge listened to all the testimony, looked at the medical records, the video Billy's phone had captured before Miss Blackwood took it. She granted the preliminary injunction, requiring every staff member to complete seizure response training within 30 days. But she denied our request to have Miss Blackwood fired immediately. She said due process had to be followed, and Miss Blackwood had rights, too. Ola explained this was actually good news, but it didn't feel like it when I knew she was still getting her full salary. Another month went by before the district finally offered to settle. They created a memorial fund in David's name, $200,000 for epilepsy research. They promised to overhaul their substitute teacher training program and require medical emergency certification for all staff. Miss Blackwood agreed to resign, with her teaching license under review by the state board. The district's lawyer kept calling it a fair resolution. David's parents just sat there, crying. My neurologist appointment that week didn't go well. The tests showed my seizure threshold had dropped significantly from all the stress. I'd need to increase my medication and avoid any triggers, flashing lights, lack of sleep, emotional stress. That's when I knew. I had to end things with Darren. We sat in his car after school. I explained I couldn't handle a relationship on top of everything else. He kept saying he understood, but his eyes were red. He wouldn't look at me. We'd been together for 2 years, but my brain couldn't take any more pressure. Emily helped me start a disability advocacy group at school the following week. 20 kids showed up to the first meeting in the library. We talked about creating buddy systems for students with medical conditions, pushing for better emergency protocols. One girl with diabetes shared how a teacher had refused to let her check her blood sugar during a test. A boy with Tourette's talked about getting detention for his tics. We made plans to present to the school board, started working on a petition for mandatory disability awareness training. Having something productive to focus on, it helped with the anger that kept building up inside me. Nev and I went to David's grave on a Saturday morning. The cemetery was empty. We didn't talk about the lawsuit, or Miss Blackwood, or any of it. We just sat on the grass next to his headstone and watched the clouds move across the sky. His parents had chosen a quote about light never truly going out, but just changing form. Nev pulled grass out of the ground, one blade at a time, while I traced his name carved into the granite. After an hour, we walked back to her car, without saying anything, because there wasn't anything left to say. Some things can't be fixed with words, or money, or even justice. The next week, I spent every evening writing an article for the local paper about what happened. I didn't attack anyone personally, didn't use inflammatory language. I just laid out the facts, the systemic failures that led to David's death. I wrote about the lack of proper substitute training, the absence of medical emergency protocols, the culture that dismisses student medical needs as attention-seeking. I ended it with specific proposals for change, mandatory medical training, clear reporting procedures, accountability measures. My voice stayed steady as I read it to my parents before sending it in. Not because I was healed, but because I'd learned to carry the damage, without letting it consume me